have a similar taste, similar nutritional profile, So a lot of work is going on to ensure that all these do not look or sound utopian, but they are actually things that are relatable to what we already know. So the next form of alternatives, alternative 2, is in the process of changes to current production systems. So that means pathway, pardon my use of the word alternative. This does not imply that these processes are mutually exclusive. They can actually go on together side by side, and they are actually going on currently side by side. So my use of alternative here is just to show different pathways by which the same problem can be addressed. So here we're looking at changes to current production systems. That means we're looking at how to make changes to what we are already doing to ensure that the environment is catered for, human health is catered for, and animal welfare is catered for. So the first one before the break, we considered, cultured meat in its different forms. Now we're going to look at changes to what we are currently doing. So one of the changes that can be made to what we are currently doing is the kinds of energy systems we use. Currently, most of the world still relies on fossil fuels. And these fuels are some of the highest culprits of environmental pollution and even human and animal welfare. So if we can shift more towards clean energy sources like solar energy, hydro, and wind, these are changes that can, affect the whole system, that can reduce the emission of greenhouse gases, that can enhance human and animal welfare. Another change that can be made to our current systems is the consciousness of animal welfare and providing enrichments for these animals. Now, this alternative is extremely important because animals have been deemed sentient beings. That means they can feel pain and they can experience suffering. So the tripod stand of the One Health approach is not complete without balancing the animal welfare. Taking animal welfare into consideration is extremely important. Those are some of the changes that can be made. For instance, in things like poultry farming, enrichments can be made to their housing systems, meaning that instead of packing them all in battery cages where they are stuffed, jam-packed in one place, where they can suffer from leg injuries and all that, they can be given more space to move, to thrive, where they can exhibit all their natural tendencies and have freedom to live as they would have, lived, without restriction, without the fear of hunger, without the fear of molestation, and being able to express fully their natural characteristics. Another change we can make is by adopting sustainable farming systems. For example, in fish production, there are systems like aquaponics, systems like biofloc, and then in general agriculture, we have integrated farming, we have organic farming. So all these are sustainable systems that, if adopted on a large scale, can go a long way to reduce carbon emissions and greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. They can be better for human health, and they can also be better for animal welfare. We also have the use of land use permutations, our crop rotation systems, our fallowing systems, all those systems that wean us from relying so heavily on synthetic fertilizers, because the production of synthetic fertilizers like urea are also a large culprit in greenhouse emissions, because we have gases like methane, we have gases like NO2, NO3 that are being released from this synthetic fertilizer production. And using land permutations like fallowing and rotation help us to allow the soil recover its natural fertility without recourse for synthetic fertilizers. So these are also some of the ways by which we can tackle this challenge. We're trying to ensure that food security is sure. We're trying to ensure that the growing population is fed. We're trying to ensure that it doesn't impact negatively on human or animal health. We're also trying to ensure that the environment is catered for. We're going to look at another alternative or another pathway to solve the same problem. This time around, we are looking at change in consumer behavior. So when we say change in consumer behavior, we're talking about little changes we can make in our daily lives that can also come together to cause, to bring a sustainable change. One of the changes we can make is the reduction in animal protein consumption. We already have people who are practicing the lifestyle of veganism, of vegetarianism. They have gone all the way with that. But I understand that we cannot all be vegetarians, we cannot all be vegans. So there are other ways in which we can also contribute. One of such ways is our shopping habits. Sometimes we like a certain product, and that's normal. And anytime we go shopping, we insist on getting that product. Now, a challenge can come in when such a product is produced so far away from where we live. That means if this product is made 10,000 miles away from where I live, that means for it to get to me, transportation costs will be involved, logistics, and most of these will involve more greenhouse gas emissions. They don't bid well for the environment, they don't bid well for human health, they don't bid well for animal health. So some of the changes we can make to our lifestyle, trying to patronize responsible growers that grow close to us, that will eliminate the need for very long transportation, that will eliminate the need for preservation, because some preservatives have also been implicated in being carcinogenic. So not all of them are good for the human health. And in places where regulation is poor, you discover that because of profit, a lot of producers and growers will ingredients into their product in order to make the product, the shelf life of that product last for longer. So still that are considerate, with that know about animal welfare and are willing to, practice it. So such responsible growers can be patronized because it's important that the kind of meat you eat, the kind of product you consume is grown in a healthy, in a safe environment where such animal has the freedom to live its full life and to express itself properly in its natural state. Another way we can change our behavior is by the public perception of alternative proteins. When most of us, when we hear the term alternative proteins, it sounds alien. It sounds like something that the West is trying to impose on Africa. It sounds like something that, it's dangerous, So there are lots of perceptions around alternative proteins. To some, it is interesting and exciting, and they want to know what it is, and, they want to try it out. But, there's this percentage of those who, just like GMO, when GMOs began to become mainstream, when they began to become very popular, it's got a lot of people were scared about what GMOs are and their effects, especially the long-term effects of GMOs on the human health. So discussions like this can help to dispel some of the myths around these things. It can help to ensure that people get the right knowledge, the correct knowledge that is scientifically backed up with research. And this will go a long way in knowing what to pick and what not to pick in the midst of the noise. There are some issues that will come up in trying to enhance alternative protein propagation in Africa. There are a lot of issues that we are going to combat or fight with. One of them is public awareness. That is one reason why we have seminars and discussions like this. This organization, the One Health and Development Initiative, is a non-profit that's trying to bring a concerted approach, meaning that we're trying to solve problems, looking at the human side, looking at the environment, and looking at animals also. So we have to bring all three together and then find solutions that work, for all. So one of the ways that this will happen is by public knowledge, sensitization, seminars such as this, so that we get people on board, we get you to understand some of the things and to know exactly what is meant whenever you hear terms like alternative protein. Another issue that may arise is presentation, how alternative proteins are being presented. This presentation can come in two ways. One way which presentation can come is the messenger who is delivering the message. Another way it can come is the product itself. The product really able to mimic conventional meat that we all know. Does whatever product that comes out, either the cultivated meat or the plant-based meat, are they able to look like what we already know? Does it taste the same? Is the texture the same in your mouth? Does it have the same nutritional profile? All those are important questions that need to be answered, and all these are things that need to be discussed, need to be talked about, before we can have wide-scale acceptance of alternative proteins in Africa. Another factor, as we all know, is pricing. Most shopping decisions, especially of middle to low income countries, is driven majorly by the price. So the question is, will these products be available? Will they be affordable? Will I be able to, buy them? Will they be the same price with the conventional meat I'm used to buying, or will the prices be lower? So all those are questions that also need to be tackled. We have the issue of culture and religion also. In Africa, there's a lot of culture and religion, and meat is one of the food ingredients that has a lot of culture around it. So there are lots of cultural activities, lots of festivities that revolve around meat. So if you're coming with an alternative to meat, then a lot of discussions need to be had around that. At the end of the year, there are lots of festivities, and lots of people celebrate those festivities by eating large volumes of meat. So will such people accept maybe an alternative? How well dressed does that alternative have to be in order to receive acceptance to be used in such cultures? Or will it be seen that you are trying to intrude into their culture? So all these are very important. Again, we have to look at the issue of legislation. Like I said before, we need a wide talent pool in order for some of these issues to go through. So a lot of legislation also needs to come in. The government needs to bring in a lot of sensitization. People need to understand. Discussions like this need to be had so that we understand what is at stake. We understand that if we continue doing what we are doing and we expect the same results, then we're not being reasonable. So all this need to come in. All this need to come in play in order to have for the alternative proteins to take root. In conclusion, I will ask you, would you consider eating cultured or plant-based meat in place of the conventional meat that you have always known? Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Yes, Dr. Are you there?
Yes, Mr. Samuel, I'm here with you. Can you all hear me?
Yes, yes, I can hear you.
All right. So somebody Edith CFO is already saying lovely presentation, and I will second that. Thank you so much for opening our eyes and bringing to our knowledge that there are actually alternative sources to protein, and we have to start putting these things into consideration, because I will call the human populace a selfish group, because most of the times people are always thinking about us, just thinking about themselves as human beings, forgetting that the ecosystem is made up of us as the human beings, the animals, and then the environment, and we have to pay equal undivided attention to all of this portions of the ecosystem, to make sure that everything, it will not be the way we want, but at least making an effort to make sure that things are done right, just as Mr. Samuel listed in one of the alternatives about consumer behavior. I know it's a bit difficult, it's alien, but we have to, at least having this, attending webinars like this would enlighten us on all of these alternative proteins available, and we can even start doing further research. And of course, why not, if it's something that would help the ecosystem, we should, as one health advocate, as one health professionals, we should be willing to look into them. Thank you so much, Mr. Samuel Oga, for the lovely presentation. And I can see people are already dropping comments in the chat box. Let me see what we get here, what we have here. Okay, people are saying thank you. Edith Esievo, lovely presentation, very interesting concept. Please, if you have questions, or if you want to unmute yourself and speak for a minute or two, it doesn't have to be a question, it could be a comment or an addition to what was just presented. So just kindly indicate. Okay, we have a question here. Edith Esievo, she said, I have got my reservations and questions. Mr. Samuel, can you hear this?
Yes, I'm with you. I can hear you.
Mr. Samuel?
Yes.
Okay, Edith Esievo here is saying, I have got my reservations and questions. It is quite helpful, but how feasible is this in rural areas? And I'm sure she's referring to, the African setting. How feasible is this? And I think I second her question. So, Mr. Sam, so how feasible do you think this is in a rural settlement?
Okay, let me say this. 30 years ago, it was almost impossible for me to, have a cell phone, carry a phone in my pocket, to be able to call someone at the other end of the world, in maybe Australia, think about the farthest position on earth. For me to be able to reach out to such a person and in real time be able to communicate. 30 years ago, that was impossible. But today, it is commonplace. Cell phones are everywhere. Probably a very high percentage of you are watching me and listening to this presentation from a cell phone. This would not have been possible 30 years ago. So it's a work in progress. I must say, it's actually at the very nascent stages. These are the very beginning stages of this work. And we must not get ahead of ourselves to feel like this must be accomplished all in one day, So it's a work in progress. And I need us to see it as such, so that we can, all weigh in on the discussion. It's an open discussion. Like I said, all hands are needed to be on deck. So it's not just about those of us in research or the scientists, it's about everyone. So please weigh in the conversation as much as you can, as much as possible, so that at the end of the day, we can come up with a product or products that are feasible, that are acceptable to everyone. Thank you for your question.
All right, Mr. Sam, thank you very much. Another question, but Dr. Edith Esebo actually said she's on a course on food security, but she has a question. It's long, but she doesn't want to overshoot her time. But I think for a discussion like this, she's on the course on food security. We're talking about food security, so I think it would be really important to give her space to say something. Dr. Edith, I will be back for you. Cornelius is asking, what are the health implications of plant protein? Mr. Samuel?
Yes, health implications. You see, when we talk about health implications, I want us to come back a little bit to where we are right now, eating conventional meat produced by animals. Currently, we already have several health implications from eating red meat. Is that correct? You know, we have several warnings from our healthcare professionals, from nutritionists, you know, to lower the amount of red meat that we consume. Now, that is already a health hazard. Now, think of a situation where using alternative proteins, we can avoid red meat totally. We can totally cut it out. And since all ingredients are being monitored, Mr. Sefian, I'm going to mute you now, right? All right. So since all ingredients are monitored, like I said, you know, in the presentation, the ingredients of meat have been isolated, and it is now known that, okay, this and this and this come together to make what we call meat, you know. So we'll take it on, the scientists will take it on from there, you know, research and all that. So I just want you to understand that even the system we have currently is not without its limitations. And as human beings, we can continue to do the best we can, which is to innovate, to make things better, to improve. We have not always been at the level where we are right now. However, we can get, you know, better as time goes on. So thank you.
Satisfied with that answer? We can move to Edith Esebo. I would really love to hear from you. Can you kindly unmute yourself? You have just 2 minutes to say what you need to say, because looking at what you're doing now, your opinion is very important in this conversation. Edith Esebo, please unmute yourself and go ahead. 2 minutes.
Hi everyone.
Hi, Edith.
Thank you so much, Sam. Sorry, did I get your name?
Sure.
Sorry.
Sam is fine.
Thank you. Yeah, all right. Thank you so much for the presentation. It was quite helpful and insightful. Okay, so I've always been eager to find out what's all this about vegan and vegetarian. And you made lots of sense today. You made a lot of things clear. And I really appreciate that. I like the fact that a lot of people are concerned about the ecosystem. They are concerned about the way things are turning out, climate change and all that. And that's why they're going towards more healthier diets. But my reservations are having to paint it out as if the people that are not are being harmful. Yeah, well, I know you stated out in your presentation that not everyone can go vegan, not everyone can go vegetarian, and that's what I appreciate about your presentation. But coming down to your presentation was looking at Africa, and we know that Africa, a lot of countries in Africa are within the low or middle income countries as regards to economics. If we're going to be doing researches on other plants, other alternatives, what's the cost implication, and where are we going to be getting this money from? Then I would say that rather than just going into let's look for other alternatives, can we also find a way of utilizing the ones we have currently? If you would check through the impact of climate change on some regions and some rural areas, you would realize that they are not as a direct result of their practices. They are results of practices from other areas that somehow the ecosystem doesn't know how to give back to the people that generate this
Imbalances.
Yeah. So like in high income countries, there's a lot of generation of greenhouse gas. There's a lot of carbon monoxide that have been exhaled or been discharged to the environment. But the direct effects are coming back on other regions that are not excreting so much. So how can those regions, like, okay, let's use Nigeria as an example. We know that we have lots of cattle, we have lots of herders, Fulani men, and the reason why they have to move from the northern region in the dry season to the southern region is because that our rainfall in the northern region is not helpful. And in the dry season, feed is scarce. So rather than saying, don't eat so much beef and let these people lose out on their business, can we find ways in which sustainable agricultural practice can come in where there is kind of like a year-round production of hay for these animals so that they don't have to move? Then if it applies all round, not everybody would eat meat, not everybody would eat chicken, but those that don't have alternatives, rather than increase costs in get these other ones, why don't we find ways of making what they have like productive for them? Because I'm serious, I've tasted some vegan options and they are nice, but not everybody can do it. And the cost is even higher. It's higher to go vegan than not to go vegan. So I'm really concerned about this. And that's why I took some courses on that vegan something and food security, because it can't apply to everyone. Take, for instance, in Nigeria, you can say all these things in Abuja and everybody is good and fine. You can't take some of these things down to Sokoto or down to Maiduguri and people would accept it. And yes, we'll tell ourselves that, okay, it will take time, but what impact is this time having on us? It may not be now, it may be in the near future. Yes, I understand civilization and all that, but let's not
let's be realistic.
Yeah, let's be realistic and let's not lose essence of all these things. Meat was given to us for food. We just have to find a balance to it, not to overexploit it, yes, but I believe that God knows the reason why the EAA, right, essential amino acids in animals are more complete than those of plants. And you should have a balance of both. You should not take one over the other. So sorry for shooting the time. I wish we had time to really talk this, maybe not in a Zoom meeting, but I really want to get into this and how it can help. Forget the high income country, not as if they don't matter, but it's easier to, because there's money, there's a lot of research going on to it, but how does it affect the low countries, like low income countries? How does it affect the middle income countries? How does it affect rural areas that don't have access to all this civilization and whatsoever? Because they need to eat food. Poverty is bad. Sorry.
All right, Edith, thank you so much. I really am happy I gave you this time, though you went a little above the 2 minutes, but it was interesting listening to you. So, Mr. Samuel, I'm also, I get where Edith is coming from. I'm also very concerned, when all of these Western ideas come, and I'm like, we're Africans, we're Nigerians. How do we find this thing to work? Looking at the economic situation of the country, and all of this challenges coming back and forth, back to back, day in, day out. How do we balance this? How do we find the balance? So, Mr. Samuel, Edith has said a lot. What do you have to say?
Thank you so much, Edith, for your comments. It's really interesting to know that we have other food security experts who are listening and are weighing into the discussion. Very happy to have you. And your concerns really, really, really valid. But I think you missed part of my presentation where I talked about adjusting the current production systems I understand that because the cultured meat, it's quite new, so everyone will latch onto that. But in alternative 2 and 3, I discussed extensively on adjusting current production systems, trying to reduce emissions through sustainable farming. I mentioned aquaponics, I mentioned integrated farming, and I also mentioned using cleaner sources of energy. So all these are options that don't have to wait for each other. So like I said, my use of the word alternative doesn't mean that they're mutually exclusive. They are all these processes can and are actually all going on together at the same time. So we mustn't lose sight of that. And it's good to have you push the discussion forward. Maybe we can, set up a meeting or something later to talk about this. You can find my profile on the OHDI website. So please go to the One Health and Development website. Dr. Tumsia, can you please put that in the chat box for anyone who is interested? Yes, so you can go there, and when you get there, you can get a lot of more information about who we are, about what we do, about the kind of research that's going on, and maybe we can, find some time to push the research forward. Thank you. So would there be any more questions or comments? Dr. Tumsia, over to you.
Yes, I'm trying to look through the chat box. There are no more questions, but Joseph Alo Okita said, change sometimes is good, but will people be willing to accept the various consequences that will come with the change, positive or negative, which we've not known, they're not known at this time, concerning production of laboratory meat? So I think it's more of a comment. There's another question from Jembero Alemo Meganans. He said, is it simple to change the behavior of Africans to consume laboratory meat? Mr. Samuel, do you think it's going to be a simple task?
Anybody that thinks this is simple does not have a deep enough knowledge of human behavior. It's not just Africans, I tell you, it's something that it's a worldwide issue. Just because our discussion today is focused on Africa, that's why, and I think majority of us here are Africans, so it's easier to relate to things that are closer to us. But however, this is a worldwide problem. This is a worldwide problem. So behavioral change, adjusting to new things, it usually takes time. It's not a one-day thing, it's not a two-day thing, but it is important we have these discussions to, understand better these things. Dr. Tumsia?
Yes, Mr. Sam, I can hear you. So one thing I agree with you and I strongly believe is that for a movement or for change to start, sometimes we can start, pushing for this change. It doesn't have to come to light while we still live or while we're still in existence, but like Mr. Samuel made a statement. I remember when GMOs came, I personally was scared. I was a bit younger, but all of this beliefs and myths that were coming with GMOs, but farmers now are rushing. Please, who is this? Can you please, Mubarak Zubairu, please mute yourself. People were scared, people were apprehensive about, what are the implications of using GMOs. But now farmers are rushing to buy GMOs because they have seen it's safe, and the fact that you get to do more with GMOs because the population is exploding. We need to find a more sustainable way to feed the ever-growing population. So for Africans, we know it's very, people are stubborn in Africa, and we're very, we're very deeply, our roots. We believe so much in our cultures and our beliefs that it's very hard for us to give up some certain behaviors. But if today, this animal welfare now, climate change, these are beginning to gain recognition in Africa, in Nigeria and Africa at large. So I think there's hope. We just need people like us, webinars like this need to keep coming up so it keeps enlightening. Some people are not even aware of the detriment of their actions and behaviors. But once you bring them to light, they understand, and they also go further to do more researches and find out. So we just keep talking, we just keep encouraging people, especially, I think when you bring about things, Africans are very, very interested in knowing what they stand to gain, what's their benefit, whatever change you're bringing, what do I need, what do I stand to gain? Before, I think they settle for that first before they start thinking about what the general population stands to achieve. It's about me first. So for farmers or for consumers, if you're able to say, okay, you stand to gain this, along the line, they get to understand the benefits for the general public. So I think in the absence of any question, thank you all so much. We're going to take our closing remark from...
I think I can see someone's hand up. Mr. Abdul Rahman, is your hand up? Abdul Rahman Safian?
Yes, please, my hand is up.
Okay, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Dr. Samuel, for your presentation. And then the moderator, Dr. I can't mention the name, but okay, I think that this topic is really interesting. Unfortunately, I think there's still a lot that we need to do. I had an organization that is working to improve animal welfare in Ghana and West Africa. Okay, and then there's this challenge we encounter daily. I come from the northern part of Ghana, and our staple food there is maize. I think Africans generally are vegans because most of the food we consume are plant-based. Okay, maize, yam, cassava, cocoa, and the rest. They are all, I think they are vegan, right? Okay, now there's this rush for cash crop farming. So a lot of people now abandon their staple foods, okay, cultivation of their staple foods, and going in for the cash crops, i.e. Soybeans, soys, okay, just to sell to commercial traders for exports. Don't you think this one is gonna bring in hunger sometime? Because it means that you are reducing the amount of food you have, and so we're going to have a security challenge in that particular area. Again, there's this land tenure system also that's not so friendly to us, and so people who want to do a bit of vegetable production, okay, to augment the little protein they get from the small poultry or chicken they have just in their backyard, will not be able to do that because of land tenure system. So I think that this issue of veganism or trying to promote veganism also has its challenges. Why don't we look at these two where we try to sustain the already vegan foods we have, that's the staple foods we our people like cultivate, to encourage them to try to improve, to try to push in more resources in that area so that people are able to get at least food to eat. Then we now bring in this one to see how best the backyard sort of, okay, production or cultivation of this vegan vegetable and all those things come into to support. I don't know whether my suggestion or contribution is clear, Doc.
Yes, I understand
very much.
I follow you, and thank you for making that contribution. It's very important that we do not lose sight of what we currently have in search for something else or something new. That's very important. Thank you. Dr. Tumsia, are you still here? I think we can.
Of course, Mr. Samuel. I'm
all right.
Yeah, last of the questions and the comments coming from our participants. This somebody is saying that was a very insightful presentation. The first time I saw laboratory produced meat on NAS Daily, I wondered, when are we going to get there in Africa? Rapid progress will be made through public enlightenment. So Mr. Sam, we'll be needing more of this from you. People are ready to listen. You know, sometimes it's a mindset problem, you know, but when you keep an open mind, you'll be willing to learn and over time, maybe even adopt what you're learning. So it's very difficult for Africans to unlearn and relearn. It's very difficult, but I think we're getting there. Thank you all so much. I will call on our executive director in person of Mr. Elunamen to give us the closing remarks, and we can call it a day. Mr. Elunamen Asiedion, the floor is yours for the closing remark.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tunisia. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear and see
Oh,
you.
great. And first of all, I must say, Samuel, that was a very fantastic presentation. It was very insightful, informative, and very educative. We all have learned one or two things from your presentation. Very lovely and well done. You know, we are very excited as an organization that this conversation is being taken seriously, and the number of turnouts that we've had today is really very encouraging. So on behalf of the organization, One Health and Development Initiative, I want to say very much thank you to everyone for joining in on this call. And we're really excited that this topic interests a lot of us across Africa. And our goal as an organization is to continue to engage Africans in line with this subject until Africa is food secure. And you know, all the alternatives that Mr. Sam has spoken about are sustainably harnessed so that we can have our future in Africa safe when it comes to food. So with this, I also call on anyone listening who is willing to collaborate. You know, we know there are gaps. Everybody has been talking about the gaps that could be arising as a result of this conversation. We have to collaborate with researchers. We have to collaborate with people who are interested in food production. We need to be able to get these alternatives to the point whereby it almost equals what the normal meat system is currently, maybe in taste, in pricing, and also in the outlook. So we need all of this collaboration and discussions to continue. So we will be very happy to have any input, anyone who is listening in would like to have. We already have our website on the chat box. You can click on it and you'll be able to reach out to us and we can joyfully commence that conversation. And I really also want to applaud Edith for a very insightful input in this conversation. Your interest in wanting to take this conversation further is really welcome. And I'm sure if you do not reach out to us, we will find you somehow and then we'll take it up and everything will go in that direction.
And most of the population in Africa is young population. According to the UN, the median age in Africa is between the ages of 18 to 20. That makes Africa the continent that houses the largest number of young people in the world. So this is a peculiarity with Africa, at least compared to the global north, where there are high populations of aging people. Another peculiarity with Africa is the issue of limited access to resources. We're talking resources of technology, we're talking access to credits, we're talking skilled labor, you know. So, you know, there are lots of limitations to access all this. And then we also have issues of land tenure systems, issues like land fragmentation, you know, and some rules that do not really favor a large-scale food production. Africa also plays host to about 60% of the world's uncultivated arable land. So there's still a lot of potential in place, but most of the potential has not really been activated. So these are some of the peculiarities that Africa has. And since we are looking at food security, we cannot ignore proteins. Proteins are very, very important in food security. If we look at some major metrics of measuring malnutrition, we discover that lack of access to proteins is one of the major ways of measuring malnutrition. We can see some deficiency diseases like kwashiorkor and the rest, you know, those kinds of diseases are prevalent in areas where proteins are lacking. And proteins are very, very important. They have a very high biological value to humans, you know, to animals in general. Proteins are also some of the most expensive components of food. So if we're talking about food affordability, food availability, cost comes in there, and protein accounts for a large percentage of the cost of a balanced diet. So this is the reason why protein is very important in the discussion of food security and why it cannot be ignored. However, we must note that not all proteins are born equal. Proteins are of different types and of different classes. And we're going to be looking at a few of them, a few of those classifications. We're looking at the classifications of proteins broadly, meaning that we are just broadly classing them into the sources. So we have on one hand the plant sources of proteins, and on the other hand we have animal proteins. And remember our topic, we are looking at finding alternatives to animal proteins. We're looking at finding alternatives to the conventional protein sources that are already available. So if you look carefully, we have plant proteins and animal proteins. And if you look at the chart here, there are some characteristics that separate the two classes of proteins. For instance, in order to grow plant proteins on a very large scale, scientists have found out that it is highly unsustainable to grow animal proteins on a large scale. And if you can take your mind back to the previous slide, we talked about increasing population. So if you have an increasing population on one hand, and you have the burden of providing food for them, and then you have unsustainably high production rates of animal proteins, you know that that's a recipe for disaster. So proteins, plant proteins are better in that regard, meaning that they can be produced at high production, at a high scale, and and it's still environmentally sustainable compared to animal proteins. It also follows in terms of costs. Growing plant proteins is usually cheaper than animal proteins. Animal proteins, are more expensive and even takes longer period for them to be grown or produced compared to plant proteins. Some argument for plant protein, for animal protein, is that some of them most animal proteins have a complete essential amino acids profile. When you see EAA profile, that's what I mean, essential amino acids. So in looking at this EAA profile, there are certain essential amino acids that are required for the normal functioning of any animal body. And animal proteins provides a more complete profile of this EAA compared to plant protein. However, this challenge can be solved by supplementation. So this lacking EAA can be supplemented from a variety of sources.
Can we please kindly mute our mic, Mr. Sam? Mr. Sam, please hold on. Yes. Adekola Adebi Hassan Alaka, please mute your mic. Please, everybody endeavor to mute your mic so we don't distract the presenter. Thank you very much. Carry on, Mr. Sam.
All right, thank you. So in production of plant proteins, well, we would find that there is minimal to no animal suffering involved. While in the production of animal proteins, we would find that there is a very high level of animal suffering involved. So these are some of the characteristics, of producing plant protein versus producing animal proteins. In this discussion, we are trying to look at alternatives. We're trying to look at ways to do things differently. We're trying to see how we can, pivot from the conventional ways of doing things, which is consuming animal proteins in large quantity, and we're looking at alternatives. So that is why it is important for us to consider all these factors. So these are some of the reasons why we need to take this seriously. Point number one, we've talked about population. By the year 2100, according to the UN, where the world population, I think should be about 12, 13 billion at the time. we have, of the top 10 most populated countries, 5 of them will be from Africa, with Nigeria taking the lead, housing over 700 million people at the time, only behind India and China. So we can see Congo on the list, we can see Ethiopia, we can see Tanzania, we can see Egypt. 5 African countries in the list of the top 10 most populated countries in the world. So we can see that with the population increase, Africa is represented heavily in this chart. So it is a problem that we have to take seriously. So this is one of the reasons why we are having discussions like this. This is the reason why we need to consider alternatives to the way we have normally done things, the way we are used to doing things. Another reason why we need to consider is pressure on our food systems. With the increase in population, it naturally follows that there will be pressure on the food systems. So that means there will be higher competition for food sources. We're already sharing a lot of food sources between humans and animals, and that competition will only go up with time. And then intensive farming will follow in order to meet up the demand, and then arable land will decline because land is a fixed asset. And since the human population is increasing, a time will come when, the available land may not be able to cater for the kind of intensive farming that will meet up the demand at the time. And research has found out that with higher intensive farming, there is more animal cruelty. So that means the picture we are looking at is a very gory picture for humans, it's a gory picture for animals, and it's a gory picture for the environment. This is another reason why we need to take discussions like this very seriously. Another reason why is the advent of pandemics, especially zoonosis. We are battling with COVID-19. Currently, the whole world, has been brought to its knees, battling with the coronavirus. Some sources attribute that to zoonosis, and there are a lot of other viruses, and bacteria. We have problems of antimicrobial resistance, all stemming up from such intensive farming systems. So all these are threats that we face. We also, and because of all this, there's a climate change conference that's currently going on in Egypt, the COP27. I know many of us should be aware of this, the COP27 currently going on, where stakeholders and world leaders are gathered to deliberate on climate issues and to forge a way forward, take actionable steps to see how we can, modify certain behavior to ease pressure on the planet, to reduce greenhouse gases. Another reason why this discussion is important is to help increase talent pools. If you look at the problem we are talking about, it's not just a problem for food scientists, it's not just a problem for medical doctors, it's not just a problem for veterinarians. It's a general problem for everyone. So all hands need to be on deck. We need professionals from all fields. We need legislators. We need behavioral scientists. We need everyone. So parts of discussion like this is to try to see how we can, increase the talent pool, get the discussion going on. We have some people who are just hearing this for the first time today about alternative proteins. We have some others who have already been in a discussion for a long time, So helping to push the conversation forward is very important in increasing our talent pools. So these are some of the reasons why discussions like this are important to be had. So what are some of the alternatives? We've talked about, we've x-rayed the problem, and we've talked about reasons why this discussion is important. We are going to look at some of the alternatives that we have to the consumption of animal meat or animal protein as we have it. One of the first alternatives we'll be considering today is alternative proteins. When we say alternative proteins, it's usually it's a compound name. It's a word that encompasses a lot of things. Some of them, most of them, refer to proteins that are produced out of the conventional way. Mostly, we get our proteins, our animal proteins, from animals, raising an animal up and then slaughtering it, and then also from the animal products, and then also from plants, growing plants and all that. But yeah, there are a group of other ways by which we can produce proteins, which require fewer inputs, such as land, water, and have generally less effects on the ecosystem. Reduction in greenhouse gases, emission, reduction in pollution. One of such alternative proteins is cultivated meat. Now, when we say cultivated meat, we're talking about meat that is produced from the cells of animals, meaning that, I'm sure this infographic explains it very clearly, meaning that a biopsy of cells is taken from an animal, and then it's grown in the lab through the stages. Of course, this is an oversimplification of the process, but this is basically what it entails. So these cells are taken, and the good thing with this is once the stem cells are still available, this process can go on indefinitely. So that means after taking these biopsy cells once from the animal, it doesn't have to be taken again, because the stem cells used to produce those meats is still available. So this is cultivated meat. Cells are taken from the animal and are grown in the lab to use to produce meat. So in that way, we have done away with the amount of water that this animal needs to drink in its life cycle. We've done away with the food that this animal needs to eat in the life cycle. We have reduced the greenhouse emissions that this animal will produce throughout its lifespan. Mind you, agriculture contributes between 25 to 30% to greenhouse gas emissions worldwide. And breaking it down further, cattle production produces about 8 to 10% of that, 8 to 10 out of that 26. So you can see that growing cattle, it really adds a strain on the environment, on greenhouse gases. And so this is one example, cultured meat, of alternative proteins. Another type of alternative protein is plant-based meat. So here in this process, instead of relying on animals, just like in the previous one, the animals are taken away from the picture completely. Remember, our conventional system is from grass to animals to humans. However, in plant-based meats, the animal component is removed from being the intermediary. So all raw materials are sourced from plants. So here, the raw materials for making meats are sourced from the plants. We already have some people who are doing this lifestyle already, the vegans and the vegetarians. So most of them already have some of this in place going already. So however, a lot of research is still going on to ensure that the final products bear a higher semblance to what we know as meat, to what is conventionally accepted as meat. After much studies, scientists have been able to identify the components of meat, what makes meat to actually be meat, and some of the components have been identified as lipids, proteins, water, and fiber. So with this knowledge of the basic building blocks of what it takes, that knowledge is taken to the laboratory, and using genetic engineering, some of these processes go on from there. Another option, another type of alternative protein uses the process of fermentation. Here, the microorganisms are used to engineer certain foods. So some of these microorganisms, most of them, their function is anabolic, that is breaking down. So they break down and some of these food substances and build up some others. So using genetic engineering, some of them can be re-engineered to begin to produce proteins on a large scale, which can be useful for human consumption. Another option is through the use of fungus, microproteins actually, and also using algae. The earth is about 70% covered with water, and most of that water is seawater. And we have lots of different classes of algae growing in the sea, and some of them are actually proteinous and can be harvested and used